I vividly recall the crisp autumn morning I departed my hometown. The aroma of fallen leaves hung in the air as I loaded my cherished possessions into my aging pickup, resolved to forge a new life far from the agonizing memories. Leaving was a wrench, yet essential. Betrayal and deceit had shattered my existence, and distancing myself from those who inflicted such pain was the only path to recovery. After hours on the road, I stumbled upon a quaint, tranquil town that appeared ideal for a fresh start. The residents were welcoming, life moved at a slower pace, and the town exuded a captivating charm. I came across a small, dilapidated gas station and garage, listed for sale for years. Recognizing its potential, I submitted a modest offer, which, to my surprise, was accepted. This property became the cornerstone of my life's and business's reconstruction. One Saturday afternoon, I sat peacefully in my preferred tavern, savoring the serenity. This tavern had become my sanctuary soon after relocating. I acquired the local gas station and repair shop at a bargain, recognizing its latent possibilities. The former proprietor, after 2 years on the market, was eager to sell. It was the perfect venue for a new beginning, enabling me to put the past behind me. My initial step was constructing a substantial retail space adjacent to the gas station to cater to the town after the sole grocery store closed at 7 o'clock p.m. I repositioned the fuel tank to enhance pump visibility from the store, creating ample parking for patrons. The store's peak hours were between 7 o'clock p.m. and midnight, though it operated 24/7. The garage, situated at the rear of the property, functioned from 8 o'clock a.m. to 5 o'clock p.m., 5 days a week, with special undertakings on Saturdays. While the bar initially expressed displeasure at our introduction of basic liquor sales, it ultimately generated substantial revenue and provided much-needed employment opportunities for the community. The enterprise flourished following a restructuring of the store's interior merchandising, thanks to a woman I employed. The equity loan was swiftly repaid, and the surge in demand, particularly on Friday and Saturday nights, necessitated doubling the staff. We sold considerable quantities of snack foods to bargoers, and on Sundays, brisk sales of affordably priced cold beer contributed to our success. I nursed a double Jack Daniels on the rocks with a splash of water and lemon, having just completed the restoration of a vintage truck's steering column, a family treasure. Locating the component and crafting the necessary fixtures took 8 months. The truck had been in his family since the 1940s, and he had no intention of parting with it. If it were feasible, he'd be buried in it. 4 o'clock to 7 o'clock p.m. was prime time at the bar, as most regulars had already dined. Within a couple of hours, the establishment would be teeming with a music-loving crowd. Farmers escorted their daughters for post-work amusement. Over my 6.5 years in this town, I had cultivated a strong reputation and established numerous friendships. The locals watched out for one another and kept me apprised of anything out of the ordinary. I frequented the bar weekly, always on Saturdays, for a pre-departure drink. It was my moment of tranquility, a time for reflection. Then they entered, and I regretted it instantly. They marred a flawless day. The woman was my ex-wife's identical twin, and the young man accompanying her was once my son. It resurrected unwanted memories. It reinforced the adage that you can't perceive evil when you're immersed in it. The boy had matured, bearing a stronger resemblance to his biological father. This confirmed that the truth invariably surfaces. Why were they seeking me out now? They conversed with the bartender, displayed a photograph, and then departed. I was thankful for my long, unkempt hair, beard, and mustache, combined with my weight loss, which altered my appearance. No one recognized me. I dispatched a message. "Come home." "When?" Roughly 30 minutes later, the bartender approached and joined me. "What did they want, Tom?" I inquired. "They intended to deliver a message," Tom responded. "They'd heard you resided here and came to investigate. They mentioned a woman named Willa is terminally ill with cancer and desires reconciliation. I requested a picture, feigning ignorance of my name. Who are they, and what's their agenda?" I pulled out a cigarette tore off the filter, and lit it. The woman is my ex-wife's twin sister. The young man is my ex-wife's illegitimate son, whom she fraudulently presented as mine for years. In your assessment, Tom, were they being truthful? I asked. Judging by their body language, I'd say they're partially honest but concealing something significant, Tom responded. I nodded. My ex-wife and her sister had consistently been deceitful, projecting sincerity while betraying me. Tom returned to his duties behind the bar. My thoughts drifted back nearly 7 years to the day I left, vowing not to return for another 7. They scoffed, believing me a fool. They learned a harsh lesson that day, never having direct contact with me again. They underestimated the depth of my hurt and the seriousness of my intent, mistaking my reaction for mere anger at their jest. They were oblivious to the discovery I'd made weeks prior. Our youngest child was, in fact, my brother-in-law's son. That revelation propelled me to this juncture. A family member, witness to Willa and Tammy's, the evil twins, frequent betrayals, furnished the evidence. She referred to them as black witches, practitioners of pure malevolence. Earlier that week, before my departure, we uncovered a recently issued insurance policy on my life, with a double indemnity clause for accidental death, totaling $4 million. A wise woman advised me to flee. When I departed in my work truck, they were unaware it was already packed with everything I valued from my 16-year marriage. I drove away without a backward glance, ending up 2 states distant. Part of the responsibility rested with me. I had impregnated Willa when she was 16, and I was 18. My family persuaded me. I vividly remember the day I left my hometown. It was a crisp autumn morning, the air thick with the scent of decaying leaves. I packed everything I valued into my old pickup, determined to build a new life far from the agonizing memories. Leaving was difficult, but necessary. Betrayal and deceit had poisoned my life, and healing required distance from those who caused the pain. After hours of driving, I discovered a quiet, sleepy town, perfect for a new beginning. The people were friendly, the rhythm of life was slow, and the town possessed a certain charm. I found a small, run-down gas station and garage for sale. Seeing its potential, I made a low offer, surprisingly accepted. This property became the foundation for rebuilding my life and livelihood. One Saturday afternoon, I sat in my favorite tavern, enjoying the peace and quiet. This place had become my sanctuary since I moved here. I'd purchased the local gas station and repair shop at a steal. The previous owner, after 2 years with no buyer, was desperate to sell. It was the perfect opportunity, a clean slate. I started by building a large retail space facing the gas station, providing the town with necessities after the only grocery store closed at 7 p.m. I repositioned the fuel tanks for better visibility from the store and created ample customer parking. Business boomed from 7 p.m. to midnight, though the store operated 24/7. The garage at the back of the lot was open from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., 5 days a week, with special projects on Saturdays. The local bar wasn't thrilled when I started selling basic liquor, but it turned into a profitable venture, creating much-needed jobs. The business thrived after restructuring the store's layout, thanks to a talented woman I hired. The equity loan was quickly repaid, and I doubled the staff to handle the Friday and Saturday night rush. We sold tons of snacks to bar patrons, and Sundays saw a steady flow of customers buying affordable cold beer. I sipped a double Jack Daniels on the rocks with lemon, having just finished rebuilding the steering column on a vintage truck, a family heirloom. It took 8 months to find the part and fabricate the necessary pieces. This truck had been in his family since the 40s, and he wasn't about to give it up. He planned to be buried in it, if possible. 4 o'clock to 7 p.m. was the sweet spot at the bar. Most regulars had already eaten, and in a couple of hours, the music crowd would arrive. Farmers would bring their daughters for some after-work fun. In my 6.5 years here, I'd built a solid reputation and made good friends. The community looked after each other and kept me in the loop. My Saturday ritual was a quiet drink at the bar before heading home, a time for reflection. Then they walked in, shattering the perfect afternoon. My ex-wife's twin sister, and the young man who was once my son. It brought back unwelcome memories. It proved that you can't recognize evil when you're living with it. The boy had grown, looking more like his biological father every day, a constant reminder that the truth always comes out. Why were they here, looking for me now? They talked to the bartender, showed him a picture, and left. I was glad for my long hair, beard, and mustache. The weight I'd lost changed my appearance too. No one recognized me. I sent a message. Come home. When? Half an hour later, the bartender approached. What did they want, Tom? I asked. They had a message for you, Tom replied. Heard a rumor you were living here, came to check it out. Said a woman named Willa is dying of cancer and wants to make amends. I asked for their picture, feigning ignorance. Who are they? What do they want? I lit a cigarette, ripping off the filter. The woman's my ex-wife's twin. The young man, he's my ex-wife's illegitimate son. She passed him off as mine for years. Think they're telling the truth, Tom? I asked. Based on their body language, I'd say they're being partly truthful. But there's something bigger they're not saying, Tom answered. I nodded. My ex-wife and her sister were masters of deception, experts at appearing sincere while stabbing you in the back. Tom went back to the bar. My mind went back almost 7 years, to the day I left, promising not to return for 7 more. They'd laughed, thinking I was bluffing. They learned a hard lesson that day. They never saw or heard from me directly again. They never realized how deeply they'd hurt me, how serious I was. They thought it was just a joke, a temporary setback in their twisted game. They had no idea that a few weeks earlier, I'd discovered our youngest child was actually my brother-in-law's. That revelation started the chain of events that led to this moment. A family member, tired of watching Willa and Tammy, the evil twins, betray me, had provided the proof. She called them black witches, masters of pure evil. Earlier that week before I left, we'd found a new life insurance policy on me, double indemnity for accidental death, totaling $4 million. A wise old woman advised me to run. When I left in my work truck, they didn't realize it was already packed with everything I wanted from my 16 years of marriage. I drove away without looking back, ending up 2 states away. Partly my fault, of course. I'd gotten Willa pregnant when she was 16 and I was 18. My family convinced me to marry her, and we had 2 more children. They thought it was hilarious. Willa told our daughters, "Your father will come back when he cools off. He needs to get his sense of humor back." A few hours later, a sheriff's deputy arrived. Willa answered the door. "Are you Mrs. Willa Rhine?" he asked. When she confirmed, he said, "Ma'am, you've been served." She laughed, thinking it was a prank. Opening the envelope, she realized I had dissolved our marriage without a second thought. The Grand Dame later told me she was stunned. My lawyer had listed all our assets and liabilities, including a DNA report, proving a year-long affair. The divorce petition included details, receipts, and photos from their hotel rendezvous. Inside was a letter informing them I was suing her husband for child support, infidelity, and defamation. Their laughter died. The joke wasn't on me anymore. I had the last laugh. Their joke had been that I was only good for making money. Everything I touched turned to gold, so Willa and the kids were spoiled, never wanting for anything. Willa later discovered I'd sold 3 of our businesses, paid off all our debts, and profitably sold our 2 apartment buildings. I canceled all credit cards, removed my name from bank accounts, and signed over my half of the house to her. I took half our net worth in cash, reducing our monthly income from $10,000 to 0. Willa and her sister learned the price of using me. My lawyer froze their assets before they even received the subpoena, leaving them broke. After the divorce, my lawyer contacted Willa and reimbursed her for 1/4 of their losses. Why, she'd asked. For him, it was never about the money, my lawyer replied. It was about principle. He hopes this gives you a chance to start over and learn from this experience. Willa refused to finalize the divorce without speaking to me, leaving us legally separated but not divorced. I had no desire to talk to someone who had lied to me for years. She had to get a job for the first time, learning that money disappears quickly without a steady income. I had my attorney forward important mail to a rented FedEx mailbox, which was then sent to my work address weekly. I knew Willa and her sister thrived on manipulation and revenge. I knew they would eventually come after me. It wasn't a matter of if, but when. Their family didn't believe in letting things go, and my absence fueled their resentment. The longer it went on, the worse the payback would be. They wouldn't rest until they got even. Until now, I thought I'd escaped. Tammy's appearance told me their game wasn't over. I finished my drink and left through the back door, in case they were watching the front. I crossed the empty lot behind the tavern and walked around the block to my truck. As I unlocked the door, a man approached. "You're a hard man to find, Mr. Arthur Seth Rasim." "No doubt," I replied. "How do you know that name?" "My name is Peter Edwards." "Your oldest daughter, Connie, is my wife," he said. "That could be a blessing or a curse," I replied, "if she takes after her mother." "So, why are you here?" I asked. "Some things need settling," he said. "That would be true if your mother-in-law would just sign the divorce agreement," I said. "What divorce agreement?" Peter asked, surprised. I told him to follow me. We drove through town and then down a long driveway to a farmhouse. Inside my home office, I showed him the divorce papers and let him make copies. Peter didn't need to know I didn't live there. I'd built the house for the grand dame, hoping she'd eventually leave her old place. Peter seemed pleasant, confident, and educated. I wondered if he was who he claimed or part of Willa and Tammy's scheme. He used my Wi-Fi to download files onto his laptop. All important records were stored there, with a master copy, in a safety deposit box. He was particularly interested in the sheriff's report Willa signed when served. He managed to print a damaging letter from Willa's lawyer to mine, acknowledging the agreed property division, but refusing to finalize the divorce without a face-to-face meeting with me. While Peter worked, I watched his expressions. He was learning things. My paperwork contradicted everything he'd been told. "Do you think Connie knows?" Peter asked. "That's something you'll have to discuss with her," I replied. "Here's a question for you. Is Willa really dying of cancer?" "Who told you that?" Peter asked. "Tammy and Seth told a bartender that today, but I know Willa's fine. She's in a common-law marriage with her former lawyer and expecting his second child," Peter revealed. "She's the one who asked me to find you to start the divorce proceedings, claims she needs it to remarry." He called his wife and put her on speakerphone. "Connie, did you know your mother lied about the divorce not being finalized?" Peter asked. "What are you talking about?" Connie replied. "Mom told us Dad abandoned us, cleaned us out, and left town. If it wasn't for our stepfather, we wouldn't have survived." "I'm sending you the legal file," Peter said. "Read it and call me back as soon as possible." While they talked, I grabbed 2 buds, opened them, and handed one to Peter. "Why didn't you tell my daughter you found me?" I asked. "Connie and I have only been married 2 years, and we have a 3-month-old son. I'm not telling anyone I found you yet," Peter said. "Everyone thinks I'm working a case." He showed me his badge, confirming he was an officer with the Paradise Police Department. I checked the department's website on my laptop, verifying his identity. "It was the accident report from a few months back that led me to you," Peter explained. "Connie filed a missing person report, which was forwarded to the wanted list. The insurance company notified me about the ruling in your favor." "So, why didn't you tell Connie you found me?" I asked again. "After reviewing your file, it became clear something else might be going on," Peter admitted. "I was curious about the $250,000 Willa was supposed to receive, along with the house deed. And why were they all lying about what happened?" "Yeah, sounds like I've been fed a few lies myself," I said. His phone rang. "It's my wife. I'll put it on speaker," Peter said. "Please keep it down." "Hi, honey," Connie said. "Where did you get all this? Is it true? Have we been lied to for years?" Seth doesn't know his real father, and neither do I. My sister Karen will be devastated. Mom chastised her for defending Dad. They don't even speak anymore. This contradicts everything we've been told. Mom and Auntie gave Dad no choice. They've been manipulating him for years. What bothers me most is that the divorce isn't final because Mom won't sign. What's really going on? It's true. I got the information from your father's lawyer's widow. I had to go out of state to find her. Her husband kept duplicates of all his records. From the paperwork, it looks like your mother was served with divorce papers the same day he left, Peter explained. I had written a note for Connie, suggesting she talk to her great-aunt Josie if she was still alive. Peter nodded. Pete, I need to find my father, Connie said. He deserves to be free of Mom and her schemes. At least finalize the divorce. What happened to the money she received? Why did she have to sell the house if it was hers? The more I dig into this, the more I wonder what's happening and why she was planning to sue him for desertion as soon as she found him. Ask your sister to watch our son a bit longer, and you talk to Aunt Josie about what we've found. Maybe she'll open up, Peter suggested. This needs to stay between us for now. This looks like serious fraud. Why has your mother been slandering your father all these years? I need to talk to the DA. The $250,000 cash vanished after it reached your father's lawyer. Don't tell your sister anything yet. If the DA investigates, it's best no one else knows. I got up to refresh our drinks, giving Peter some privacy. Why do you want Connie to talk to Aunt Josie? Peter asked when I returned. Josie compiled all the information about Willa and George's affair, I explained. She never married, but looked after the family like a mother, raising her daughter alone. Being a single mom gave her a different perspective. She believed Tammy and Willa were conspiring, using George and me. Their ultimate goal is still unclear. If this is true, why? Peter started to ask. Aunt Josie's granddaughter, Jod, wants her to move in with her, but Josie insists on waiting until the truth comes out. Jod visits with her 2 sons. Jod leads a very secluded life, I explained. Socializing with Willa and Tammy takes a toll. They've used people their entire lives. It wasn't until Josie gave me the information that I realized the extent of it. Do you want to ask me about your children before I leave? Peter asked. Not until I know you are who you say you are, I replied. This could all be another part of their game. Look into my lawyer's sudden death. If Willa's planning to sue me for desertion, what makes her think she can win? Peter's face paled as he realized who he'd married into. We decided to trust each other enough to exchange numbers. He promised to keep me informed. I walked him to the door, shook his hand, and said goodbye. After he left, I cleaned up, locked the apartment, and took the long way home, making sure I wasn't followed. It gave me time to think. My life had improved drastically since leaving the past behind. Did I want to dredge it all up again? Knowing Willa and Tammy, I had to prepare for what was coming. They would stop at nothing for money. As soon as I walked in the door, 2 small children grabbed my legs. I picked up my 3- and 4-year-olds, the lights of my life. Just like their mother. I felt incredibly fortunate to have all 3 of them. My wife Jod called out that dinner was almost ready. I went to wash up. Over dinner I told her about my day, about closing up the store. I never could have imagined my life turning out like this when I left Paradise almost 7 years ago. I'd promised my grandmother Josie I'd stay in touch, and I did, calling her every Sunday. About a year and 3 months ago, she called me, asking for help. Her granddaughter Jod needed to escape a bad marriage and find a safe place to start over. Jod, 10 years younger than me, had no children and was living on an army base out of state. I didn't know much about her, but I owed Josie and was happy to help. It took a week to locate and partially furnish a 2-bedroom apartment in a small town for her. It would have been impossible without a friend's assistance. When I arrived to pick up Jod, she'd already quit her job, emptied her accounts, and packed her bags. Her husband was due to deploy for Army training. I arrived quietly around 8:00 p.m. with a rented U-Haul. With help from a few neighbors and friends, we loaded everything she wanted into the truck. I had her out of town in under 4 hours, refusing, To ensure her safety, I refused to disclose where I was from as we drove. Jod and I began to get acquainted. Late that night, she received a call from her grandmother. I smiled as she recounted the conversation. "Grandma, Art picked me up. You could have warned me. He's a wild bushman. He might look half decent if he cleaned up." The next day, Josie contacted Jod's lawyer, arranging for all legal documents to be sent to my FedEx box. Jod cautioned that her soon-to-be ex-husband could be trouble, so I took precautions to protect her. Jod took over managing the store and proved exceptionally capable, implementing successful changes and prioritizing customer satisfaction. Her personality drew in new clientele, and she established a well-organized, efficient staff. Josie had to obtain a restraining order against Jod's ex due to his incessant threats. He was dishonorably discharged and returned to my hometown, assuming Jod would be there. Jod wore a diamond ring, a symbol of her new life. She handled banking and bookkeeping, quickly gaining acceptance in the community. I introduced her as Jod, and her honesty and engaging personality made her a favorite. She often wore her long black hair pulled back from her face. When asked about the ring, she'd reply, "I'm sure you'll figure it out," sparking rumors she was my mail-order bride. She started bringing me lunch on Saturdays, as I often forgot to eat while working, leading to weight loss. Our relationship blossomed naturally. Everyone assumed we were a couple, and Josie kept us updated on events back home. We were intrigued to learn Jod's ex had become friendly with Tammy. The day Jod's divorce was finalized, our relationship deepened. We celebrated with friends at the local bar, sharing our first kiss during a slow dance under the dimmed lights. 6 months later, we moved in together. While the kids were bathing one evening, I shaved off my beard and mustache, leaving only stubble. The kids watched, fascinated. I lathered my face and theirs with the shaving bowl and brush Jod had given me for Christmas, much to their delight. Jod walked in, surprised to see the kids giggling with soapy faces. "Looks like Daddy would look like you with a clean face," Jod teased. "Should I cut his hair too?" Both toddlers enthusiastically yelled, "Yes!" I laughed. "I'll let the barber handle that on Monday." "No, I'll do it myself before you change your mind," Jod insisted. After drying and dressing the kids for bed, they sat at the kitchen table and watched Jod cut my hair. By the time she finished, I barely recognized myself. I told Jod she'd done a great job. She sent me to shower while she cleaned up. During this, her grandmother called to say Connie had just left. Jod believed her grandmother was finally ready to confront the family and set things straight. Connie had learned that my 3 children were supposed to receive $600 each per month from annuities I'd set up for child support, but they hadn't received a dime. The following week, I endured good-natured ribbing about my new look. People asked Jod if she'd had to blackmail me into joining civilized society. Jod would jokingly reply that I'd promised to bathe at least 3 times a week. Most people got the joke. Some didn't. It was interesting to observe how people behaved when they thought they were superior. The Paradise Police informed me I was being sued for child abandonment, desertion, and back child support. Jod and I found this amusing, imagining a collections agency trying to track me down. The mailman who delivered the news found it funny too. His boss, the DA, hired a lawyer to represent me, using my case to piece together the bigger picture. Peter estimated Willa and Tammy had stolen over $48,000 from each of our children. They reopened the investigation into my former lawyer's sudden death, classifying it as a criminal case. Jod's ex-husband became a person of interest. If their findings were accurate, Willa and Tammy faced 7 to 10 years in prison, and Willa's former lawyer, now her common-law husband, could be disbarred. The lawyer they hired for me would be paid by them, and I needed to remain hidden to help build a stronger case. We had a few weeks of peace, then Josie called Sunday night, informing us paperwork would be filed Monday. She emailed everything she'd gathered over 7 years, notarized statements, recorded conversations, and names of attorneys for a countersuit. A $2 million accidental death insurance policy caught my eye, explaining some missing funds. Jod discovered it had been purchased 6 months before I left. We spent half the night forwarding information to the DA, convinced this was a trap to lure me back. The next morning, Judd contacted the recommended lawyers and selected one, sending them everything along with a retainer. As soon as Willa's team filed the lawsuit, I would serve them before they could serve me. Friday morning, Judd called. Josie was on her way with guests, having left Thursday night and stayed overnight in a hotel. Things were escalating. Judd and I decided to close the store on Saturday and have a long weekend with family. Peter was driving with Connie and their son. All Connie knew was that they were visiting Judd. Around 7 o'clock p.m., we saw a Ford Explorer and Escape pull into the driveway. 4 adults emerged. Judd noticed my apprehension and took my hand. My truck was hidden in the garage, so no one knew I was there. "Who's that with Josie?" Judd asked. "That's Peter, his wife Connie, holding their baby, and Karen, my second oldest," I replied. "Are you?" "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied. Judd, holding our youngest, opened the door. We all went out to greet our guests. Karen burst into tears when she saw me. I handed my son to his great-grandmother and hugged Karen tightly. Connie handed her son to Peter and joined the embrace. My daughters had blossomed into beautiful women, and seeing them together was a powerful moment. "Good to see you again, Peter," I said, shaking his hand. After introductions, Judd served a huge meal: beef shoulder, mashed potatoes and gravy, scones, Yorkshire pudding, string beans, and hot apple pie. Once the kids were settled, we discussed everything. "First of all, Art, is it okay if I call you Dad?" Peter asked. I nodded. "Dad, the DA believes Jode's ex's car was involved in your lawyer's accident. We're doing a paint comparison with the current owner's vehicle. If it matches, he'll be charged with manslaughter," Peter explained. "The fire that destroyed his office that same night is being investigated as arson. He was seen in the background on a security video. Since Willa and her lawyer sealed the divorce records, they think there's no documentation to prove what happened. They filed suit against you this week," Peter continued. Judd looked at me and started to cry. "I always thought you were overprotective when you moved me here, but now I see you weren't. I thought your questions to my grandmother were excessive, but now I realize you needed to understand who we were dealing with before making a plan." "Willa and Tammy were served with your lawsuit on Thursday," Josie said. "They must have realized I was communicating with you. We were afraid they'd start harassing Judd, so we came here quickly." "Grandma, we got your house ready," Judd said. "It's finished. You just need clothes." "I brought most of it in the car," Josie replied. "Connie will ship the rest, including the antiques." I gave her power of attorney to sell the house and furniture. "It's time to leave paradise," I announced. "I'll drive back with Peter and Connie and rent a truck to haul everything out. It's time to see if our suspicions are correct." "What suspicions?" Peter asked. "The lawsuit against me is a ploy to lure me back," I explained. "With the $2 million accidental death insurance policy, it's clear my former lawyer's death was a test run." Peter, Connie, Karen, and Josie's faces paled as the truth sank in. "They were planning your death, Dad?" Connie whispered. "I had a strong suspicion at the time, but even my lawyer didn't believe me," I replied, grinning. He learned firsthand that I was right. Peter excused himself to make some calls. This gave my daughters, my wife, and me time to reconnect. Judd found pictures of me from when we first met. Both daughters admitted they wouldn't have recognized me. When Peter returned, everyone fell silent. "Willa will be taken into custody after the holiday," he announced. "We can hold her for 48 hours before charging her with 3 counts of theft for stealing the annuity payments from her children. We'll slow-walk the process so she doesn't get a bond hearing right away. Dad, if you can fly in Wednesday, rent a U-Haul, and visit some familiar places to be seen, tell anyone who asks you're there to pack up Josie's belongings. That way, Willa will have to communicate from jail. The DA confirmed your suspicions. We'll have police protection for you at Josie's house until this is resolved," Peter explained. "Peter, are you using my children's father as bait to To lure out my cousins? Jod asked. What assurance do I have that he won't be harmed? I looked at Jod, and she saw my resolve. Damn it, you'll do it without hesitation, won't you, she said. Jod knew me better than I knew myself. Art has always been like that. That's why I called him to save you from your ex, Josie said. Art never asks anyone to do what he wouldn't do himself. He wants to rid us of those witches for good. My only fear is Art being in danger again, Jod replied, smiling. If Art were a boxer, he'd be a world champion, Josie declared. He's quick on his feet and can outthink them. Willa and Tammy have no clue he knows anything. Ladies, relax. I'll be in Peter's capable hands, I reassured them. If anything happens to me, remember, he'll have to answer to Connie. Peter simply nodded, understanding the risks of my return to paradise. Later, while the women talked, Peter and I conferred. The DA thinks Jod's ex will make his move once he knows you're in town. He'll be furious you rescued Jod from that terrible marriage, Peter said. Willa will learn you're there from a planted informant in the city jail early Thursday morning. If he's caught in the act, will he talk? I asked. Based on his military background, he's always accepted responsibility when caught. He's a follower, not a leader. I expect him to fold easily. He sticks with Willa and Tammy because he's easily manipulated, Peter replied. The sign read, Welcome to City of Refuge. Population 34,848. It also declared that the laws of the United States did not apply here. It was like the Wild West, with justice depending on the whims of local authorities. Law-abiding citizens were prosecuted while illegal immigrants were ignored, a twisted version of progressivism. The working class paid for the sins of others to appease those in power who wanted lower wages and cheaper labor. Numerous actions were taken to facilitate this exploitation, requiring those in power to turn a blind eye. Not much had changed in almost 7 years aside. From the freshly paved Main Street, everything looked the same. My first stop was my old favorite haunt, if it still existed. Bob and Betty's Burger Bar was still there, looking much the same, but with a fresh coat of paint. I pulled the U-Haul into the parking lot and headed for the entrance. It was 11:15 a.m., just before the weekday lunch rush. I was counting on being recognized. I'd been a prominent businessman in my former life. We wanted everyone to know I was back. As I sat down and picked up a menu, I noticed people staring and using their cell phones. A server brought coffee and creamer. Are you ready to order? She asked. Is the Wednesday special of meatloaf, baked beans, and garlic mashed potatoes available? I asked. How did you know about that? The server inquired. It's for regulars, not advertised. Tell Jack that Art wants brown gravy and fried onions with the meatloaf, I said. The waitress looked at me like I was crazy. I stood up. Never mind. I'll tell him myself. I walked through the swinging doors into the kitchen, the server trailing behind, shouting my order. Jack turned and grinned. You dumbass, he said. You're a few weeks early. Welcome back, old friend. Susan, bring Art's coffee back here so we can catch up while he eats. Jack, the son of the original owner, had never changed the name. We'd been friends most of our lives. We talked until just before the lunch rush. He asked a staff member to get his wife, giving us a chance to discuss more sensitive matters. Art, you should know, after you left, my wife ended her friendship with Willa and Tammy for good. She didn't like what they were doing or saying about you and the kids. Jack, a few things are about to happen. Last night, there was supposed to be an arrest. If things go right, we'll trigger a series of events, like a row of dominoes, I explained. Connie's husband, Peter, works with me. That's why I came back early. Jack looked at me seriously. He's a damn good cop, an honest man. He put 2 of our former city council members in jail last year for corruption. You'll have to tell me more later. Too many ears here. We saw Sasha pull into the parking lot. She looked good. I sat back down and waited for her to come in, knowing she'd see me from behind and be unsuspecting. Jack, what happened? Susan asked. It was important, Sasha replied. Then she saw me. I stood up and turned to face her. Sasha. My little sister lost it. Her older, meaner brother was home. I hugged her tightly, like no time had passed. It took her a few minutes to compose herself. Jack asked the kitchen staff to give us some privacy. "Do Mom and Dad know you're back?" Sasha asked. "No, and it's best we keep it quiet for a few days," I replied. "Are you here because Willa was taken into custody last night?" my sister asked. "Yes, and it's going to get worse before it gets better," I said. "Once I'm settled, I'll be under police protection. The police are looking at my former lawyer's death with fresh eyes, believing it's connected to the arson attack on his office." Jack and Sasha's expressions spoke volumes. It was common knowledge the newly appointed DA was determined to clear up several unsolved cases. "You're a decoy to draw someone out," Jack said quietly. "If this works, the arson, the fraud, and several other crimes will be solved in the next few days," I replied. This was all orchestrated to force me back to the city. Willa's arrest and my sudden reappearance will disrupt a carefully laid plan. "What's behind all this?" Jack asked. "A $2 million insurance policy. Double indemnity for accidental death," I replied. "Insured on me." My sister murmured. As we walked out to the U-Haul, we were talking when we noticed Tammy pull up beside us. "Where are you staying?" Sasha whispered. "At the Grand Dame's. I'll be moving her things to the new house. She wants to be away from whatever's about to happen," I replied. "Josie left town? Why?" Sasha asked. "She wants to be near her granddaughter and our 2 sons," I answered, smiling. "Jod and I have been together for over 5 years. We have 2 boys, who just turned 3 and 4. My sister was stunned. "How did you and Jod get together?" "Josie and I stayed in touch," I explained. "When Jod needed help escaping a bad marriage, her grandmother called me. I moved her to my place. We believe her ex is responsible for my lawyer's death and the fire at his office." "Do Tammy and Willa know you're aware of what's happening?" Sasha asked. "No, but they will soon, when they start making their moves," I replied. Just then, Tammy approached. "Art, I need you to drop part of your lawsuit against us," she demanded. "The DA will be charging Willa within 48 hours. Unfortunately, my lawyer says we can't do that because Willa filed a new divorce petition claiming desertion, abandonment, and back child support," I said. "Until the court rules on her claims, everything has to stay as is." "You can't do that. How are we supposed to bail her out with no assets?" Tammy cried. "You have a court order freezing everything. Maybe your father could help by putting up his house as collateral," I suggested. "After all, you're both his daughters." Tammy turned and walked away, disappointed. "Willa and Tammy's father wants nothing to do with them," Sasha revealed. "Not since he found out about Seth's real parentage. He says they turned out just as bad as their mother." That brought a smile to my face. Finished with that encounter, I climbed into the U-Haul and drove towards Josie's house, stopping to pick up packing supplies. 3 hours later, I backed the truck into Josie's driveway, using the large side mirrors. I parked close to the garage door, locked up, and went inside. I checked to make sure nothing had been disturbed. Josie had said she'd left the curtains open, but they were closed. I texted Peter to ask if he had closed them. He replied that the officers inside might have. Knowing this, I unlocked the front door and entered. "Mr. Rhine," an officer said, holding out a cell phone. "Peter Edwards wants to speak with you." "Hi, Peter," I said. "Looks like those who need to know. Tammy talked to me at the burger place after you left. She wanted me to lift the freeze on her and her sister's assets. I refused," I reported. "I heard that," Peter said. "We recorded Willa and Tammy discussing their plans. Jode's ex, Brad Press, came up a lot. Willa told Tammy to let him know that you know where Jod is. Figured that would motivate him. Our hunch was right. Brad showed up less than an hour later. Willa told him where you were staying. Our informant, who was arrested earlier today, told her you were back to move Josie's things. When Brad asked where, Willa said, Jod's grandmother's house. A few minutes later, I saw the garage door open. I climbed into the van, pulled out stacks of cardboard boxes, and started packing up the house. At 6:30 p.m., the pizza from Papa John's arrived. When the delivery driver knocked, he asked if I was moving. I said no, just helping a friend. Brad made his move around 11 o'clock p.m. Using a tire iron, he jimmied the front door lock and slipped inside. Seeing a light in the kitchen, he headed there, pulling a 9mm pistol from under his shirt. He found me sitting at the table, drinking coffee. "Hey, Art," Brad said. "Willa and Tammy say hi. I'm here to find out where Judd is so I can pay her a visit." "Sorry, but I'd never tell my lawyer's killer, or the man who burned down his office," I replied. "Before you eliminate me, because we both know you will, how much were you promised from the insurance settlement?" "What makes you think I did it?" he asked, taking the bait. "Because you seem like the type they could manipulate into doing their dirty work. So how much of the $4 million accidental death policy did they promise you?" $4 million? They told me it was only $750,000, he stammered. I laughed. "Did you know Seth is actually Tammy's first husband's son? George and I were both played by the twins for years. My divorce lawyer sued George and Tammy for everything they had." Brad's face went white. "That's why I knew Willa suing me for desertion and back child support was a scam," I continued. "The divorce was already final, just needed her signature. She manipulated me into coming back. That's when it all clicked. You're just another pawn in their game. Ask yourself, what are their plans for you? My divorce only delayed their plan to eliminate me. Killing my lawyer put their original plan back in motion. You have a chance to set them back for years. Knowing them as we do, what does your gut tell you? It's a painful thing to watch a fool realize he's expendable." "I'm screwed either way," Brad said. "The fact that your lawyer lost control of his car and hit a tree at 70 miles per hour is manslaughter. Manslaughter would get me life. You could get 5 to 10 for manslaughter, but murder is life. And when I'm dead, they can claim you acted in a jealous rage over Judd and didn't know what you were doing. Did they set you up to be the fall guy? Most accidental death policies don't pay out for murder." "If you were in my shoes, what would you do?" Brad asked. "You'd make a deal, turn state's evidence, hope your cooperation is taken into account. That way, you get revenge on those who were planning to use you," I said. Brad put the gun on the table. "Call the police," I said. "Brad, turn around. They're standing right behind you." Connie watched her husband on the phone, wondering what was wrong. Peter had told her that her father was at Josie's. A late call on his cell had woken them both. While he talked, she put the kettle on for hot chocolate. When Peter hung up, he was smiling. "Your father surprised us all tonight. He talked Brad down, basically forced him to confess everything. The undercover officers videotaped the whole thing." Connie was speechless. "How did my father do that?" "He told Brad some facts he didn't know, like the truth about Seth's parentage," Peter said. "I think your father also convinced Brad that the insurance policy wouldn't pay out for murder. That was the tipping point. Even I don't know if that's true, but it created enough doubt for Brad to accept the consequences of a lesser offense instead of life without parole. Aunt Josie always said your dad was a quick thinker, but this was unexpected." "What does this mean for my mom and sister?" Connie asked. "If Brad agrees to testify, they'll both be charged with arson, manslaughter, and at least attempted murder of your father," Peter replied. Connie picked up her phone and called Jode to tell her the news. They made a plan. Josie would watch the kids for a... Since Judd was flying in a few days later, Connie planned to meet her at the airport after receiving a text about her arrival time. After I hung up, I filled my sister in on everything. Peter was already dressed and on his way to the police station to secure Brad's signed confession before the night was over. I didn't wake until 8 o'clock a.m. My first action was to call Jack about repairing the front door. He said he had a contact, and within 30 minutes, a repairman arrived. The door was quickly replaced, complete with new trim and a lock. The gentleman was just finishing up when Connie pulled up with Jode. Judd leaped from the car and rushed into my arms, tears flowing down her face. At that moment, the weight of everything she'd endured truly hit me. "Brad was arrested last night," I told her. "He surrendered to the police. He was protecting me. I wasn't ever really in danger." If that's true, why didn't you call? Judd asked. Why did I have to find out from Connie? The police didn't leave until almost 2 a.m., I replied honestly. I planned to call you this morning. I embraced her tightly. I promise I'll never put myself in that kind of situation again. As soon as the repairman finished, we secured the car, stowed Jode's luggage, and headed to my brother Jack's restaurant for breakfast. Karen, Sasha, and my parents were already there. Jack's staff rearranged tables to accommodate our large group. Everyone gave Judd a warm welcome. The breakfast was delicious, and Jack was so enthusiastic about recent events that we cleaned our plates. My parents were overjoyed to learn about our 2 sons, Carson and Hunter, named after both of my grandfathers. Judd showed them pictures of our children and us from her phone. My daughters then revealed how they had discovered me with Josie. We were still at the restaurant when Peter arrived, looking exhausted. Willa and Tammy are in custody, he announced. Brad confessed to everything, including his original plan to eliminate his father. He'll be charged with arson and manslaughter. When he testifies in the witch trials, Tammy and Willa will face 3 counts of grand larceny and 2 counts of conspiracy to commit liquidation and fraud. The DA is working with the divorce judge, who handled Dad's case, to expedite the finalization of your divorce. Peter, are you saying Art and I can finally get married? Judd asked, struggling to comprehend everything. The DA took the necessary paperwork to the judge, Peter explained, along with Dad's original divorce papers. He's hoping the judge, with all the facts, will waive Willa's signature, the waiting period, and issue the divorce certificate. Turning to Jode, I said, I think I'd better buy you a proper engagement ring today and finally make this official. A murmur went through the group, and tears welled up in Jod's eyes. She'd always believed it would happen, but not so soon. Before we left, Mom and Dad insisted we come over for dinner. Jod and I spent the afternoon packing until around 5:30, then headed to my parents' house. Mom and Dad had many questions. Jod recounted how I'd saved her from a failing marriage, thanks to her grandmother, and then described her career path. We were still enjoying their company when Peter and Connie arrived with my divorce certificate. It was a relief to finally be free. Jod had the opportunity to tell them all about our children and our life together. Mom suggested we should have the wedding before we returned home. At that point, Dad grabbed Peter and me, a cold beer for each of us, and led us to the den, talking nonstop. Word of Tammy's arrest had spread, and people were calling with additional information. Apparently, what we knew was only the tip of the iceberg regarding Tammy and Willa's activities. It looked like the mayor would be implicated as well. What about Will's common-law husband, I asked. How involved was he? He'll probably be disbarred, but he'll remain involved in raising their children. Nothing we've found links him to the witches, Peter responded. Has anyone contacted Aunt Josie? Connie inquired. Jody's dad wears a size 6.5 ring, just in case you're wondering. A few minutes later, Peter and I were on our way to the mall. He bought Connie a jewelry set, and knowing Jode's taste, I selected a 3-ring engagement set. We returned to find that no one had noticed our absence. I was on the phone with Josie when Karen and her boyfriend arrived. The house was full, so we all gathered in the living room, bringing in extra chairs from the kitchen. Dad directed Judd to sit in his chair, which immediately alerted Mom that something was up. She watched intently. Silence fell over the room as I knelt and asked my common-law wife to legally become my wife. I completely surprised her. Of course, she said yes. The celebration continued. My father proudly declared, I need to catch up on almost 7 years of celebrating with my son, Jod and Art. This engagement is the perfect start. Peter drove Jod and me back to Josie's. A huge weight had been lifted. On Friday, we went to City Hall to get our marriage license. Jod discovered that Connie's wedding dress fit her perfectly. Jack agreed to be my best man, and Karen would be Jod's maid of honor. The DA offered to officiate. I had to buy a suit at Macy's. There was no way my old one would do. My future wife was happy for me to marry her in blue jeans that Sunday afternoon in my parents' backyard, with the whole family present. We exchanged vows. To everyone's delight, even the twins' father was there. We'd made it clear we didn't want gifts, but my former father-in-law slipped me an envelope. Colin, this isn't a wedding gift, he said with a smile. It's your early inheritance. The rest of my estate will go to your daughters." I tucked the envelope into my suit pocket and promptly forgot about it for the rest of the day. Everyone captured the ceremony on their phones and texted it to Aunt Josie. Someone asked about our honeymoon plans. Jod replied, "After everything we've been through, once Grandma's settled in her new place, our honeymoon will be a week in Florida and a week in California at Disney with the kids. Because without family, we wouldn't be where we are today." Before leaving the next day, I gave Jod an envelope. Inside was a bank promissory note for $100,000 and a short message. "Thank you for helping to fix karma. I always suspected the twins were involved in their mother's death. I'll relish watching them get what they deserve for their actions, and so will my granddaughters." Jod slipped the envelope into her purse without comment. After hugging my daughters and parents goodbye, Jod and I climbed into the U-Haul and drove home, finally free from the shadows of the past.